We come to a red light and I stop and I look at her. She's looking straight ahead. And I said, Rosario, is everything okay? You haven't said a word.
Best piece of advice you've ever received? Simple question, I realize it, but...
I mean, it's profound, but it's not profound. We talked earlier, you know, in my past, in San Francisco, I was a criminal defense lawyer, and it was an absolutely brilliant experience. The people that I met, the things I was exposed to, the community that I served. You know, I've often said, if our life is a book, that was one of the best chapters I'll ever know. It wasn't necessarily my calling in the sense that it was a perfect fit for my temperament. I didn't want to do it well into my adulthood, but I'm so grateful for it. It taught me a lot. When that came to a close, and I knew the day it came to a close, I was done. I was very nervous because the person I most admire, my hero, my best friend, was my dad. And I had to go now tell my dad, not just that I was quitting a job, but that I was quitting a career. Because I really didn't want to be an attorney beyond that choice that I had made. So I went to my dad and I pulled him out of his business and we got to go have a bite or a drink. And we sat down at this place and I was so nervous. What was his reaction going to be? And finally, I said, Dad, you know, we're here because there's something really important I want to share with you. He said, what is it? I said, well, you know, I'm quitting my job and I'm quitting the law. It's not what I want to do. And literally in that moment, my father, without missing a beat, smiled. Something was already wrong. He smiled and he looked at me and he said, that's great. And I was just like stunned. It was like, I expect parental lecture number, what have you, about the investment of time and money and this is respectable and all those typical things. And I said, Dad, that's not what I expected. And I actually asked him, why? Why do you say that? Why is it great? And he said, because I don't think you've been happy. And I think you should go find what excites you. And whatever that is, I think that's what you should go do. And it was like the utter simplicity and heart and humanity of that moment. As simple as that statement was, I was just cowed. It like took me to my knees. It was like, oh my God, I know that you're wise. I know that you're an amazing dad, but you've just upped the game. And that's what I would say to people. And the other is a quote which I'm going to read because I don't want to get it wrong. It's from, I mean, after all, you don't want to misquote William Faulkner, of all people. So William Faulkner had this wonderful quote that I've always loved. Always dream and shoot higher than you know you can do. Don't bother just to be better than your contemporaries or your predecessors. Try to be better than yourself. That's the game. You know, it's that like 100-day thing. Every day I'm going to wake up and I just want to be 1% better than the me that was yesterday.
Were you working for a firm?
I was working as a lawyer. Mm-hmm. It was a foundation in what was the ghetto of San Francisco. It was called Baby Hunters Point. So there was the Baby Hunters Point Foundation that about 125 people. In the center was the sort of linchpin, the sexy sort of fundraising piece, which was criminal defense. So we represented the indigent adults of that geography in lieu of the public defender. They were ours. And then we had, alongside that, we had the social workers, and we had the drug rehabilitation program, and we had the job skills retraining program, and we had all of these, the investigators. The idea was a holistic solution for this beautiful community that was very beleaguered in many ways. Keep the families together, the kids in school, the guys out of jail, et cetera. And our chief counsel was named Richard Bancroft. Richard Bancroft, I was so intimidated by this man when we first met. Basso profundo voice, tall, good-looking, African-American, older, a civil rights leader in the South before LBJ coined the phrase civil rights. He'd been a national president of the NAACP. He'd seen life that I couldn't even imagine. And he was our chief counsel. And then we had a few attorneys and then a couple of schlubs like me. But then we had all these other services, these human services, to serve this beautiful community. And for a kid who really had never spent time in the projects or in the criminal justice system, certainly, it was eye-opening. And it was a perfect dance. It was a perfect marriage for me at that time. These people became my family. They became my teachers. I learned more in my very first year of interning for them than I learned in 3 years of law school. It was extraordinary. Yeah. They're still there.
Did you see Pursuit of Happiness? That takes place in San Francisco, correct? Yeah.
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 Yeah. Great film. Great story.
Excellent.
Yeah. Extraordinary real story. Yeah. Yeah. It was, you know, as they say, the best of times, the worst of times.
Right.
I loved every day that I spent there. And emotionally, I was a wreck almost every night. Yeah, I wasn't built for criminal defense. I couldn't separate, you know, I wasn't a great chess player. I wore it on my sleeve a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah. But again, it gives you just insane levels of appreciation for how diverse this life experience can be, and just the unexpected challenges and joys. You know, like that was one of the most joyful communities I've ever experienced in my life.
Do you ever go back? I'm sure. Has it been gentrified by now, maybe?
Yes and no, not really. I mean, it's such a physically, it's literally you cross a bridge to get to it. You don't go there unless you mean to go there. So when I say it's segregated, I mean it like literally physically is its own distinct area out by the old shipyards. But the truth is, I could be wrong because, you know, precious as land is, let alone in San Francisco, maybe it's been gentrified. I haven't been up, you know, Harlem's been gentrified, maybe Baby 100 Point been gentrified. I haven't been up to see it in, oh God, I don't know, 15 years or more. Yeah.
So you had the lunch with your dad. He gave you his blessing, so to speak, even though you already had this plan. And then you gave your notice, or you had already given your notice at that time?
I had let people know. It wasn't like I walked in, gave my notice and walked out the door. These were family. It was really heart-wrenching for me to leave. But yeah, I couldn't not. And there were some personal things that went on that just made it impossible for me to be doing that work. But it was like, yeah, you know, when I went to law school, I went to Golden Gate University Law School, which was actually directly across the street from my dad's place of business. And everybody knew my dad. And it was just so perfect. Anyway, my first year of law school, I met a gal who was in my class. She was probably about my age back then, single mom, 2 boys, MSW degree, and a private social work practice that was hers.
Oh, wow.
And she was a full-time first-year law student. Rosario, her name was Rosario, African-American, big personality, smart as a whip. And I remember being, at first, like, you know, I didn't approach her because she was like Superwoman, right? How do you have an MSW and 2 kids and be a full-time law student and just, how is that possible? Well, we did become friends. And one day she approached me halfway through our first year, I think it was, and she said, "Gary, I know I hear you've worked at Bayview Hunters Point, and you're close to them. I'd love to meet them. Can I go out there with you sometime?" And I said, "Of course, absolutely." So I took her out on every Tuesday was staff meeting day when everybody's there. And I said, "Let's go out on a Tuesday. You'll meet everybody." So I took her out. Introduced her, walked in, introduced her to everybody, schmoozed away, got into the staff meeting, came out, schmoozed with everybody, hung out, made sure she met everybody who was there. And since I loved being there, I wasn't in a hurry to leave. Anyway, finally, it's time to go. We get in my little Carmen Ghia Volkswagen to head back to downtown San Francisco and drop her off late afternoon. So suffice to say, Rosario was not a shy, retiring wallflower. She was full of life. We get in my car and I start driving, and I've been driving now for several minutes, and she hasn't uttered a syllable. We come to a red light, and I stop, and I look at her. She's looking straight ahead, and I said, "Rosario, is everything okay? You haven't said a word." And privately, I'd never experienced that, right? And she turned and she looked at me, and very slowly, she said, "Those people really love you." And it took me a minute for the dimension of that to sink in, right? It was, I think she was a bit surprised by the dimension of our relationship. And I tell you that, I share that anecdote really to describe how meaningful that was to me and how hard it was to leave them. It wasn't hard to leave the practice of law at all, but it was hard to leave the people. But I will say this, just much like being a kid in the 60s in San Francisco and being at UC Berkeley in the heyday and putting on and then that experience at Bayview Hunters, those are all related in the daisy chain of my life. Those are all pivotal moments that really have everything to do with forming my worldview, how I see things, what I care about. It was an extraordinary time. I'm still to this day grateful that I have the history that I have. Yeah, pretty cool. Pretty blessed. And here we are in Hollywood. Not bad. Excited for, I don't know, I think we're at a really exciting moment. Like that, for me, when the studios became purchased, and Vivendi bought Universal and Sony bought Columbia, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and they became populated with a different group of people. And the budgets went up in the $20 million star, and all of those things aligned with the demise of the indies. So those, 25 or more robust companies that were putting out as many films, if not more, than the studios collectively, right? Who were either broken up for their library value or just went bankrupt or whatever happened, right? So the Hemdales and the Vestrons and all of those wonderful companies. And suddenly there was no independent cinema. The studios became more corporate. They made half as many films with double the size budgets. And there was this contraction moment. And it's a time when I started to take walkabouts and do other things alongside this thing called producing. And suddenly, because of what's happened in recent years, we now have something that is so much more robust than that ever was, the demand for stories, the size of the appetite, and the number of series and films that are needed and actually being, I mean, COVID aside, obviously production's been quashed for the year, but the number of projects that are being developed and produced overall for all of these streamers who have a lot of diverse appetites to feed, it's absolutely stunning to me. And I think it's a great time to refocus our energies and, be in the game and figure out this new landscape.